Before going any further, take a moment and write this sentence in the comments. I am the source. Do it calmly, not as a ritual, not to please anyone, but as a quiet decision to participate consciously in what you are about to hear. When you comment, you are not interacting with a platform, you are anchoring an inner position. Expression stabilizes awareness. And if this content is helping you see something with more clarity, there is also the super chat option, not as a request or obligation, but as a simple way to support the continuity of this work so these ideas can keep being shared in depth and without distortion. There is something very few people understand about the true nature of reality, and that misunderstanding is the root of almost every struggle they experience. Everything you call life, success, failure, love, scarcity, joy, or pain does not happen to you. It happens through you. The world is not an independent force acting upon your existence. It is a mirror, precise and impersonal, reflecting the state of consciousness you consistently inhabit. Reality does not argue, it does not judge, and it does not decide. It responds. This is where the secret that transformed so many lives begins to unfold, and why it has been misunderstood for so long. It is not magic. It is not luck. It is not positive thinking, nor is it blind optimism. It is a law, as exact and consistent as gravity, yet far more subtle. The law of assumption. What you assume to be true, what you live from internally, becomes the framework through which life organizes itself around you. When I was asked how everything seemed to unfold so naturally, travel, recognition, material ease, and even peace in the middle of chaos, I never pointed to techniques or methods. I smiled because the secret was never in doing, it was always in being. Modern humanity is obsessed with techniques because it avoids responsibility for the inner state. It wants procedures, formulas, steps, but it forgets the principle. It tries to change the world while remaining the same internally. It waits for proof before believing, when the truth works in reverse. Belief precedes evidence. The invisible is the cause. The visible is the effect. There is nothing supernatural about this. What people call a miracle is simply the natural outcome of a consciousness that remains faithful to a state even when circumstances contradict it. One who understands this no longer lives as a victim of events. They stop reacting to life and begin projecting it. They do not ask because asking implies absence. They assume. They do not beg. They declare inwardly. This is what was taught to Neville, that all real change begins in silence. That it is not physical effort that moves the world, but invisible conviction sustained in the mind. That life is a stage faithfully acting out the script written in imagination. The law responds perfectly. It does not distinguish between good and bad, moral or immoral, possible or impossible. It simply reflects the state being lived. This is why learning more is rarely the answer. Remembering is. Remembering that you are cause, not effect. That power is not outside of you, but within. That every thought is a seed, and every feeling is a command. And when this is understood, you realize there is no gap between wanting and having. There is only assuming. At this point, transformation begins. Not in the visible world, but in the inner one where everything is created before it appears. What you once called destiny begins to bend, not because you forced it, but because consciousness always leads. The so-called mystery is not magic, it is law. And law responds to the state you choose to live in. Everything starts with the recognition that you are the creative center of your experience. There is no power outside of you shaping your life independently. What the world shows you is the echo of what you hold as true within. The common mistake is believing that events act on their own, that people and situations have an independent will over you. But nothing reaches you without first passing through consciousness. Every encounter, every repetition, every challenge is permission granted internally, often unconsciously. The unawakened person believes the world attacks them. The awakened person sees that they are projecting. When the inner state changes, the outer response must change. One who lives in scarcity will see lack everywhere, even surrounded by abundance. One who lives in harmony will find peace where others only see conflict. You never see the world as it is. You see it as you are. Each person lives inside the mirror of their own assumption. Once this is understood, the effort to fix circumstances disappears. Attention turns inward, toward the source. Responsibility is assumed, not as guilt, but as power. Nothing happens to you without resonance. What hurts you reveals a state ready to be transcended. What repeats itself shows a pattern still alive. Victimhood dissolves. Blame becomes unnecessary. Only choice remains. The choice of state. To assume yourself as creator is to step off the position of the victim and take the seat that was always yours. It is to understand that real prayer is not asking, but accepting. I am that. It is to move through life knowing that the state you carry determines the path before your feet. You do not need to force, convince, or fight circumstances. You only need to remain faithful to the state you wish to see expressed. Reality does not create, it performs, and you are the invisible author. The world has never been your enemy. It has always been a loyal servant of imagination. Everything responds to what you are, not what you wish. So before trying to change the world, change the state. Live as one who already possesses. Feel as one who already is. And the invisible will become visible, not by chance, but by law. Attention is one of the most powerful instruments a human possesses, and paradoxically the most neglected. Where attention rests, life flows. Reality is nothing more than the accumulation of what consciousness feeds daily. Most lie distracted, reacting to appearances, emotions, and fears. That dispersion keeps them trapped in cycles. They want prosperity while feeding lack. They want love while nurturing fear. They want peace while sustaining tension. Attention is creative. Sustained focus turns states into lived reality. The law does not evaluate. It reproduces. When you understand this, power returns to its rightful place. Not in events, but in the direction of your inner gaze. Whatever is held as real internally, when sustained with feeling, must externalize. The secret is not fighting thoughts, but redirecting attention. Withdraw energy from what you do not want, and it weakens. Feed the desired state with feeling, and it becomes inevitable. Trying to change the world without changing focus is like arguing with a mirror. Life reflects. The reflection only changes when the observer changes. Mastery of attention is the beginning of mastery over life. It is not mystical. It is discipline. The mind will wander back to old habits, but each return to the assumed state strengthens the bridge between inner and outer. This is how the impossible becomes natural. This is how distance collapses. Those who master attention are no longer carried by circumstances. They understand they are the force behind them. They do not wait for signs, because they know the world follows consciousness. Where attention rests today, becomes tomorrow. Guard it, and nothing can be denied to you. Silent acceptance is the final revelation. The average person asks, pleads, negotiates with life. The conscious creator accepts. Everything imaginable already exists in potential. Feeling it as real seals its expression. When imagination is saturated with conviction, creation is complete. There is no gap. Acceptance is authority. The calm of one who knows the decree has already been issued. When you assume the feeling of fulfillment, the world reorganizes to match it. The skeptical mind calls this fantasy, but experience teaches otherwise. The universe does not respond to words, but to states. And once this is understood, reality ceases to be something you endure. It becomes something you consciously inhabit. The law understands that the physical world moves slowly. That is all. What you see is only the shadow of something that has already occurred in the invisible. There is no effort involved, no struggle to endure. There is only the quiet certainty that what cannot be seen is more real than what can be touched. Many fail because they believe they must make things happen. They search for signs, people, confirmations, opportunities, all trying to prove something they have not yet accepted within themselves. But the correct movement is always inward. Manifestation begins the moment desire is abandoned and the state is adopted. As long as you desire, you affirm absence. The moment you accept, you affirm possession. This is the difference between asking and commanding. One creates distance, the other creates reality. Silent acceptance is the point where the voice of I want dissolves and the awareness of I am emerges. It is the instant the soul stops pleading and remembers it is heir to everything. When you feel something with anticipated gratitude, you are telling the law that it has already been received. And the law responds with absolute precision because it answers feeling, not words. This is why so many pray without result. Their words request, but their feelings deny. The true secret is to live internally what you wish to see externally. Close your eyes and see it. Do not ask how or when. Feel it and remain there. What is accepted emotionally becomes unavoidable, and when this acceptance is sustained, the visible world has no option but to conform. The universe is nothing more than the outer stage of an inner decision, and the one who learns to accept in silence discovers they never needed to ask at all. The next revelation is persistence. This is where most people abandon the process, not because the law failed, but because they became tired before the reflection appeared. The human mind has been trained to trust only what the senses confirm, so when the outer world does not change immediately, people assume nothing has happened. But the conscious creator understands that manifestation is not an instant spectacle. It is the inevitable unfolding of a seed already planted. To persist does not mean repeating a request. It means remaining faithful to what has already been accepted as true. Time is simply the distance between the inner state and its visible expression. It exists to test consistency, not to punish. Every moment you remain firm in the feeling of fulfillment, even when appearances deny it. Invisible threads rearrange themselves to bring your assumption into form. When doubt arose, the instruction was always the same. Remain in the end. That is the command behind all creation. The ordinary person submits to what the eyes report. The awakened person is guided by inner vision. Persistence is the quiet refusal to negotiate with fear. It is the calm knowing that what is unseen is already complete. Each time you choose the invisible over the visible, it draws closer until the world finally yields, and it always yields. This persistence is not tension. It is serenity. It carries no strain. It is the rest of one who knows creation is finished. Impatience reveals incomplete acceptance. The true creator does not measure time because they live from fulfillment. Everything necessary was initiated at the moment of assumption. The world simply follows the script. At this stage, what once seemed miraculous becomes ordinary. Coincidences align, doors open, people appear, not randomly, but in obedience to sustained consciousness. Nothing resists a mind faithful to the end. To persist is to love the unseen until it takes form. It is to choose certainty daily. I am what I have decided to be. When the world challenges you, it is not denying you. It is asking whether you truly believe. And when belief remains silent, steady, and unmoved, time stops being an obstacle and becomes only the messenger of faith. What is held consistently must appear. The final revelation is identity. Everything you experience grows out of the name you give yourself. I am. These words are the origin of all creation. The unaware use them carelessly. The awakened use them knowingly. Every time you say I am, you activate the creative center within you. That is why the secret has never been asking for something, but assuming yourself to be what you desire. You do not manifest what you want. You manifest what you are. Reality does not answer desire. It answers identity. The mind habitually separates itself from fulfillment by saying I want wealth, I want love, I want health. But wanting confirms distance. As long as you want, you affirm lack. The law does not process requests. It reflects states. If you remain in wanting, the universe keeps you wanting. But when you assume I am prosperous, I am loved, I am whole, you are not pretending. You are activating a state that already exists within you. To assume a new identity is to let the old one die. The mind resists because it clings to familiarity. It points to appearances and says this is not real yet. Ignore it. Appearances speak the language of delay. Identity speaks the language of creation. What you assume internally must eventually express externally. The world is a mirror of who you believe yourself to be. When this is understood, chasing ends and attraction begins. One who knows themselves as abundant does not hunt resources. They express abundance naturally. One who knows themselves as love does not seek approval. They radiate coherence. Everything flows from I am. The more faithfully you inhabit your chosen identity, the more life confirms it. But this identity cannot be mechanical. It must be felt. Feeling animates the word. To say I am with conviction is to decree. It is not a future claim. It is a present declaration. I am exists only now. Watch what follows your I am, because it maps your life. Every statement about yourself is an instruction to reality. When identity and feeling unite, creation is complete. Everything afterward is revelation. Understand that nothing here is metaphor or philosophy. It is law. The same order that moves the stars responds to consciousness. Reality is the projection of what you hold silently. Nothing outside you needs to change first. The moment you stop believing something external can save you, power returns to its source. When authorship is assumed, the world reorganizes. Power is not in repetition, but in the state behind the words. Ask no more for what already lives within you. Do not wait for signs or permission. The answer is always you. If you desire prosperity, feel prosperous now. If you desire love, feel loved now. If you desire harmony, feel whole now. What is accepted as true becomes visible. The law does not delay or fail. It responds to certainty. When doubt arises, remember this. The world is not judging you. It is serving you. It does not oppose you. It confirms you. Decide who you are. Assume it fully and remain there. The invisible will bend, time will adjust, and what once seemed impossible will feel natural. What many call a miracle is simply obedience. Obedience of life to a consciousness that remembered its authority. From this moment, stop asking, begin assuming, release anxiety, and wear the calm of one who already has. And when the world tests you, smile inwardly and rest in certainty. It is done, because just as night follows day, the visible always follows the invisible. And one who knows this law no longer fears life, because they recognize life as themselves in expression. The next understanding that unfolds naturally after identity is integration. This is where the law stops being something you think about and becomes the way you live. Many understand the principle intellectually, but still experience inconsistency because they treat assumption as an exercise instead of a state. They assume during meditation, during silence, during moments of clarity, but abandon the state when life presses against them. Integration means there is no division between your inner knowing and your daily reactions. The state you choose is not something you visit. It is something you inhabit. When assumption becomes integrated, you no longer need reminders, techniques, or reinforcement. Your responses change automatically because perception itself has shifted. This is why some people appear calm in situations that would shake others. They are not suppressing emotion or pretending strength. They are simply living from a different internal position. Life touches them differently because they are no longer living at the level of appearances. They have moved upstream to the cause. When you live from the cause, effects lose their power over you. Circumstances may still arise, but they no longer define you. They inform you. And information does not dominate consciousness unless you allow it to. Integration also reveals why effort collapses manifestation. Effort implies resistance. Resistance implies separation. When something is truly yours internally, you do not strain to hold it. You relax into it. The relaxed state is the creative state. Tension signals that you are still negotiating with reality. Relaxation signals acceptance. This is why the greatest changes often happen when people stop trying so hard, not because they gave up, but because they finally aligned. Alignment is effortless because it removes contradiction. You stop pulling in opposite directions. At this stage, imagination is no longer used as a tool. It becomes perception. You do not imagine to escape reality. You imagine because imagination is reality at its source. The outer world becomes secondary, not ignored, but deprioritized. You are no longer impressed by it because you understand its role. It is a delayed echo. You listen, but you do not obey. You observe, but you do not submit. Your allegiance has shifted inward. This is also where emotional maturity develops. You stop judging yourself for transient feelings. Emotions arise, pass, and dissolve without destabilizing your state. You no longer panic when doubt appears because you understand that doubt is not creation. Sustained identification is. A passing thought has no power unless you dwell in it. A momentary emotion has no authority unless you build a home there. The integrated individual allows mental weather to move through without changing their climate. This understanding ends inner conflict. Conflict only exists when two states compete for dominance. When identity is chosen and maintained, alternatives lose relevance. You do not argue with fear. You outgrow it. You do not fight lack. You become fullness. You do not chase peace. You embody it. Integration is not suppression. It is transcendence. What no longer defines you no longer controls you. As this deepens, time itself begins to feel different. Urgency dissolves. Waiting disappears. You no longer ask when, because you are no longer standing outside of fulfillment. You are living inside it. The body may still move through sequences, But consciousness is no longer counting. And when consciousness stops counting, reality accelerates. Paradoxically, the less you watch the clock, the faster things unfold. Time responds to detachment because detachment signals trust. At this point, faith is no longer belief. It is familiarity. The state feels normal, natural, obvious. This is the clearest sign that assumption has taken root. What once felt like imagination now feels like memory. You are no longer convincing yourself. You are remembering yourself. And memory does not require effort. It only requires allowance. The integrated state also reshapes relationships. You stop needing validation, reassurance, or confirmation from others. Not because you reject connection, but because you are no longer sourcing identity externally. People begin to respond differently to you, often without knowing why. Authority without force is felt. Confidence without display is recognized. Presence without explanation is magnetic. This is not charisma. It is coherence. When inner and outer are aligned, the field around you stabilizes. Life begins to cooperate in subtle ways, not dramatically at first. Small adjustments, gentle openings, quiet opportunities. This is how the law works. It does not shout, it arranges. Those who miss this stage often do so because they are looking for spectacle. But creation prefers elegance. It prefers efficiency. It moves through the path of least resistance. When you are aligned, resistance dissolves and movement becomes smooth. Integration also clarifies why comparison weakens manifestation. When you compare, you momentarily abandon your state and enter another. You borrow someone else's reflection and forget your source. The integrated individual no longer compares because comparison requires insecurity. Security ends the habit. You are no longer measuring progress because progress implies distance. You are simply living. Eventually, even the concept of manifestation fades into the background, not because it stopped working, but because it became unnecessary to name. You do not call breathing a technique. You do not label digestion a process. They function because they are natural. Creation becomes the same. It happens because it is what you are. This is the point where life stops feeling adversarial. Challenges may still appear, but they are no longer interpreted as opposition. They are adjustments, refinements, feedback. The world is no longer something to overcome. It is something that responds, and response is neutral. It takes the shape of your state. From here, guidance becomes intuitive. Decisions arise without struggle. Choices feel obvious. You are no longer calculating outcomes because you trust alignment. This trust is not naive. It is experiential. You have seen enough confirmation to stop questioning the source. Doubt loses its grip because evidence accumulates quietly. This is what it means to live as cause. Not to control events, but to precede them. Not to manipulate outcomes, but to embody origins. The integrated individual does not wait for permission to be what they have already accepted themselves to be. They move naturally, speak simply, act cleanly, and life follows. What remains to be understood is not another technique, not another layer of instruction, but a return to simplicity. This is where the teaching completes itself, and where most minds attempt to complicate what is already finished. When consciousness finally rests in itself, there is nothing left to achieve, only something to maintain. And maintenance is effortless when identity is stable. The law does not require constant attention. It requires consistency of being. Once the state is lived, life takes care of the details. This is why true mastery is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not seek confirmation. The one who has assumed authorship no longer explains, defends, or persuades. They do not need to be right. They need only to be aligned. Alignment replaces effort. Silence replaces struggle, and clarity replaces anxiety. When the state is secure, behavior follows naturally. There is no forcing of action. Right movement arises on its own, without deliberation. At this stage, fear loses its authority. Not because it never appears, but because it is no longer believed. Fear becomes information, not instruction. The moment fear is observed without obedience, it dissolves. It cannot survive without identification. The same is true for doubt. Doubt is simply a thought that has not been adopted. When it is not fed, it fades. Consciousness returns to its chosen position without drama. Life now unfolds with a sense of inevitability, not urgency. Things happen in sequence, not because you are pushing them forward, but because the path is already set by the state you live in. You are no longer chasing outcomes. You are allowing confirmations, and confirmation is far more satisfying than pursuit. It carries no tension. It arrives with a sense of recognition, as if you had known all along. This is also where gratitude becomes natural, not practiced. Gratitude is not something you generate to attract more. It is the emotional atmosphere of fulfillment. When you are truly living from possession, appreciation arises spontaneously. You are no longer thankful for what you want. You are grateful because what you are feels complete, and completeness is magnetic. The outer world continues to change, but your relationship to it is transformed. Success no longer inflates you. Challenges no longer diminish you. Praise does not define you. Criticism does not destabilize you. Identity is no longer negotiated with circumstances. It is anchored within. This is freedom, not the absence of events, but independence from their authority. At this point, the law is no longer something you use. It is something you express. Your presence becomes the teaching. Your way of being communicates more than words ever could. People feel the difference because coherence is felt, not explained. You do not instruct by convincing. You demonstrate by existing. There is no longer a question of whether the law works. Experience has already answered that. The only question that remains is whether you will continue to live from what you know, or drift back into old habits of reaction. The law will not punish either choice. It will simply reflect it. This is its perfection. It never interferes. It mirrors. From here forward, life becomes a dialogue rather than a struggle. You move, life responds. You choose, life confirms. You remain faithful, life aligns. There is no opposition in this relationship. There is cooperation, and cooperation is the natural state when consciousness recognizes itself as cause. You no longer wait for signs because you understand that signs follow, they do not lead. You no longer ask for permission because authority was never external. You no longer fear loss because what is lived as being cannot be taken. Forms may change, but state remains, and state is the origin of all form. This is where the teaching closes, not with an instruction, but with a remembrance. You were never meant to fight reality. You were meant to precede it. You were never meant to chase fulfillment. You were meant to embody it. You were never meant to beg the universe. You were meant to direct it through your state of consciousness. From this moment, let life respond. Do not push. Do not prove. Do not explain. Remain. Remain in the state you have accepted. Remain in the knowing that what is assumed with conviction is already done. The world will adjust. Time will cooperate. Circumstances will arrange themselves without strain. And when the mind returns to old questions, answer them with stillness. When the world challenges you, meet it with calm certainty. You have nothing to defend, nothing to convince, nothing to chase. The creative act is complete because the law has already heard you. The invisible has already moved, and what remains is not effort, but allowance. This is the end of seeking. This is the beginning of living. It is done.